Hello guys and welcome to the sixth part of my tutorial on how to create an inventory system for the Blender game engine. And first of all, let's see what we have done up until now. If you remember, we had created a simple scene, and in 3D view you can only see just the basics, which are a camera, our main camera, uh, a light source, a rectangle that represents the floor, and of course our spawn point, which is responsible for spawning the various dropped items. And what we have done up until now is that when we play the game, when we press P, we have enabled our mouse cursor, and we are able to move our mouse cursor over a dropped object. And these dropped objects are created when we enter a scene, and we can hover our mouse over a dropped item, and by left clicking we can pick it up and add it to our inventory. And furthermore, what we have done is that we have assigned the I key to performing the function of turning on and off our inventory. So if I press I, turning on the inventory screen, and where we can see that the various items that I have picked are now stored in different slots in my inventory. And what we are going to do today, if you remember, this object here is the representation of a pack of arrows in my inventory and in my game. I know it's not the best 3D model, but imagine that this is a pile of 10 arrows, and if I go to my database, here it is, my DB weapons, and if you remember, I had specified that each pile of arrows consists of 10 arrows, so every time I pick a pile of arrows from the ground, this is equal to picking up 10 arrows, 10 single arrows. And furthermore, I had specified that each slot in my inventory can hold up to 30 arrows. The problem in the game is that I have picked up 3 piles of arrows, a total a sum of 30 arrows, and the problem is that they are not stored in a single unit, but they are stored in 3 different slots. And what I want to do today is write some code in order to store multiple units of a single object, of the same object, in a single slot. And before we do this, we are going to again to make some alterations in our code, and to make things a bit easier and more reasonable. And first of all, what I'm going to do is go to my main script and work with this loop here. Here I have a loop that scans all the values of the global dictionary named which has as a main key the inventory, my global dictionary for my inventory. Okay, so I scan the values of this dictionary, and I assign some values. I'm assigning values to some keys, and that's not what I want. That don't. Okay, we don't care about this part of code, but for this loop, for this statement here, and the problem is this gdinv values thing, and let me show you why. Okay, let's say that I run the game and that I pick up this axe here. Normally I would expect it to be stored in the first slot of my inventory, Yet the problem is that dictionaries are not sorted. So if I check, I have here a print command to print my inventory. If I check the console, you can see that the item that I have picked, it was stored in slot 8, because you see slot 8 contains the weapon 2 item, which is my axe, whereas the rest of the slots contain nothing. They are empty. If you check all the values, they are empty, and that's not what I expected my inventory to do when picking an item. I was expecting that it would save it in the first slot. So using this statement in my for loop doesn't work as I expected, so I have to make some alterations. And first of all, I'm not going to scan my dictionary, my inventory dictionary, but I'm going to create a simple loop which will assign I the values 1 to 8. Okay, remember that in range function the last number is never assigned to the I, so it will I will take values from 1 to 8. And then you may remember, or better, let me open my database, my inventory database. Okay, if you remember, I had specified the IDs slot 1 to slot 8 for my slots, so I can refer directly to these keys, and I don't need to scan the values as I had done before. So what I'm going to do is, and first of all, to make it easier, so I won't write gdinv all the time, I'm going to assign a simple variable where I'm going to store my inventory, and I will make an alterations here. So I'm going to write if inv and then my first main key, and this will be this key, the slot key, or to have a better view, here in the console the main key are the slots. So first of all, I'm going to make a reference to my main key, which is the slot keys, which are the slot keys. So I'm going to write inv slot and followed by the number of the slot. Okay, notice here that I takes values 1 to 8, and these are integers, but for my keys I need a string to specify the slot, the number of slot. So I'm going to convert the value of the I into a string. Okay, so here is my alteration. Instead of id obj, I'm adding inv slot plus string of I, and this will do the same, but it will ascertain that the items will be saved to the first available empty slot. So let me make another alteration here, string of I, and let's check that it does work as expected. So press P and pick up an item and check the console. Okay, you see now that slot 8 is empty and slot 1 contains the weapon I had picked up, and of course the rest of the slots are empty. So this method works more like works as expected, and I'm going to do the same change in the inventory init script. Okay, I'm going to assign again my dictionary, my inventory dictionary, to a simple variable, and then I'm going to replace this with range 1 to 9, and this with inv plus slot string of I, and this one here, I'm going to grab this one and replace the I with this one, and let's check if I made everything correct. Pick up this, and okay, my inventory works fine. Let's pick another object, and okay, we had fixed this. And the thing is that now slots are filled from the first to the second to the third, and etc. Okay, having done this, let's proceed to the main part and to the main purpose of this tutorial, which is to create inventory slots that hold more than one unit of the same object. And in order to do this, I have to go to my database and add another another row which I have added here, but this is a reference file. I'm going to the file as you have it in your PC if you have followed this tutorial and have tried to recreate it. Okay, this was our inventory database as we had it created until now, and I'm going to add a quantity value which will be the number of the items, the number of the units of the same object that the inventory slot holds. And for the empty slots, this will be 0. Okay, let's fill these values and export again to CSV file. Yes. Okay. Yes. And this is my new CSV file. And let's go back to our main in Blender file. And first of all, we are going to make some alterations here in order to achieve our purpose. Okay, and first of all, I have assigned the global dictionary, the inventory dictionary, and I think I will have to assign another variable for the weapons dictionary. I think I'm going to need it. Alright, so now here we detect if an item is pickable, and then we have written the code that will add it to the inventory. What we are going to do now is that we are going to get rid of most of this code, and we are going to check we are going to check whether a slot has already stored the same kind of item that we have picked, and this slot we are going to check whether it has empty space or not. For example, if you have 20 arrows that occupy a slot, and this slot can hold up to 30 arrows, this means that there are 10 arrows that can be stored in this slot. So we have to check whether there is empty space in a slot that is already occupied by other units of the same item, and fill the slot. And if we have other items left, we need to store them in another slot, whether it is empty or it is half filled with objects of the same type. And what we are going to do here, what we are going to check all the time is the quantity of the picked item that is left. And whenever I pick an item from the ground, it has some initial quantity. Okay, here we are. No, not here. This is okay for the sword, axe, and bow are 1, and for the back of arrows, it's equal to 10. So first of all, I'm going to specify which is my initial quantity, the quantity of the items that I have picked from the ground with a single click. So I'm going to go to my weapons database, my weapons dictionary, and I'm going to check whether I'm going to store to a value the object that I have clicked and its quantity. Okay, so in this value I store the quantity of the object that I have clicked on, and this is the name of the dictionary as I had saved it here in this variable. And furthermore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to need is the maximum quantity of the object I have clicked on. Hit object. Okay, notice that the hit object command here detects where the object in which the mouse cursor is over. But here in my if statement I have specified that I want both to have the cursor over the object and left click the mouse. So this one is the object that I have clicked on. So here I'm going to save the max quantity an inventory can hold, and where am I picking these values? From my main dictionary, my weapons dictionary. And where do I get the data for my dictionary? Where have I got this data? From my database. Okay, here I have specified both the quantity of the dropped item and the max quantity an inventory slot may hold. Okay, so here we have a for, but we will have some statements, some if statements. And to make things simpler and more clear, I'm also going to assign a slot a variable where it's going to store the main key of the slot dictionary. And to make it clearer, let's write it. Okay, so all this I'm saving it in a variable, so I won't have to write it all the time. So this variable saves the slot, the different slots starting from the first one and going to the second, third, and so on. Okay, so I have assigned this variable inside my for loop, so in each turn it's going to have another value. It's going to refer to another key in my inventory, and then I'm going to create one more if statement. Okay, I have this if statement that will work whenever my inventory, my code detects an empty slot. But before that, and that's why we made the alteration to make the slots filled first, to make the slots fill from the first to the second, third, and so on, because we want first to detect if it is if it's already if an item of the same kind is already stored in an inventory slot, and finally we are leaving the empty slots to store what is left and was not stored in a previous slot that was holding some units of the same of the object of the same kind. So first I'm going to detect if there is a slot obj equals to the string of mo hit object. Okay, first let's save our file. First I'm checking whether there is a slot that is already occupied by an object of the same kind. And in this case there are two possibilities. The first possibility is that the slot can hold all the items that I have picked, all the units of the item that I have picked. So if I have a slot that contains 10 arrows and I pick another 10 arrows, these 10 new arrows will be all stored in this slot that holds that was holding the 10 arrows, leading to a slot that holds 20 arrows, 10 that I have picked and 10 that were already stored. And in this case we don't need to do something more. All the arrows will be saved in a single slot. But imagine the case where I have, let's say, 25 arrows in a slot, and I have picked up another pile of 10 arrows. In this case, my slot has not enough room to store all 10 arrows. It has only 5 arrows. It has room only for 5 arrows, because 30 minus 25 is equal to 5. So I have to store the 5 arrows in this slot, and there will remain 5 arrows that will be stored in another slot, whether this another slot contains arrows or it is an empty one. So under this if statement, I'm going to go to the second level of if statement, where I'm going to check if the quantity of the picked item, which is here from this value, plus the quantity that is already stored in this slot, are equal or less to the max quantity that can be stored in the slot. And here is the max quantity variable. So in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to change the quantity of my slot. The slot quantity is going to be equal to Q plus slot quantity. Okay, you understand that I'm updating the quantity that is stored in the slot, and I'm adding to the existing value the value Q, and this will be all saved to a single slot, because here I have specified that this code will be executed only if there is enough room to hold both the quantity I have picked and the already stored quantity. And furthermore, what we're going to do is that we have to subtract the value from the Q variable, and because I have stored all the items, all the number of the items that we are stored in the Q variable, I'm making it equal to 0. And I hope you understand it. Okay, all the arrows were stored in this slot, so no need to hold a number, positive number in the Q variable. Q variable becomes 0. And this was the case where the quantity of the picked items may be stored when there is enough room in a slot to hold all the total of the quantity of the picked item. But we have said that there is another case where the quantity plus the quantity that is already stored is greater than the max quantity a slot may store. So in this case, what we are going to do, okay, let me write it just to have a more clear image. You don't need to write it. Okay, Python will understand with what the other case is, but I'm writing it to show you, to have a more clear image of what I want to say. Okay, here the quantity that of the items that I have picked up plus the quantity that is already stored is greater than the quantity that my inventory slot can hold. So in this case, the quantity of the already stored, the quantity of the item stored in the slot will be equal to the maximum quantity, and my slot is filled, and and what is left is to update the q variable, and this q variable will be q minus the empty space in the empty space here in my the empty space before updating. So this line goes here. First I'm going to update the q variable, because if I update this and then try to run this command, because I'm going to use the slot quantity value variable here, the slot quantity key here, the value of the slot quantity key here, and if I update this first and then try to update this, I'm not going to receive the correct result. So first update the empty room, slot q max minus slot quantity. Okay, the new value of the q will be the old one minus the empty space in the slot, and this empty space is the maximum quantity minus the quantity already stored. And then update the value of the slot quantity key and set it to maximum. And this is for the and this is for the case where there is a slot that already contains an object of the same type with the one I have clicked. The other case is whether there is an empty slot, and in this case I have again two sub if commands. I have a second level of if commands. The first is okay, I'm writing this just to be correct as far as it concerns programming. There might be a case where the quantity of the item you have picked can't be held in a single slot. Okay, here in my database, my inventory database, no, my weapons database, I'm sorry, I have specified, I have declared that 10 for the picked items quantity and 30 for the max quantity in the slot. But I don't know the reason. I may had specified that this number was 40, greater than what a single slot may hold. So I have to write some code for this case, because in this case I want 30 arrows to be stored in the first slot and the remaining 10 in another slot. So for this case I'm going to where is it? For this case, or first of all, let's write the case where there is enough space to hold the total of the quantity of the picked object, and this case is if q is smaller or equal to maximum quantity. Okay, and in this case what we want to do is we want to slot quantity to update the quantity of the slot and make it equal to q, and q is equal to 0. And this is the case if the quantity of the picked items is smaller than the max quantity that can be stored in a single slot, then store all the quantity in this slot and make the q value equal to 0. And the other case is where the q is greater than q max. And don't worry, I'm going to make some examples in the end, and you will see how this works. Okay, and in this case what we're going to do is we want the quantity of the slot to become equal to the maximum, because all available space will be used, and the quantity that is left is q minus q max. Okay, because q max quantity will be already stored in this slot, so what remains is q minus q max. And furthermore, I have to specify another condition here, and I is less or equal to 8. Let me check my reference file. Sorry, wrong reference file. I think this one here, no, or this one, yes, or else I is less than 8. Oh no, okay, my bad, not here, an omission here. I'm leaving this here as it is, and I'm going to change here the value, and I'm going to explain why. And maybe here, yes, add this condition here too. Okay, what's the problem? Here we have specified that a quantity will be stored in a slot, and there will be left some the rest of the quantity to be saved in another available slot. But what the problem is? What's the problem here? If I press P and I, okay, it has some codes here, and line 43. What's the problem? I have somewhere, I must have forgotten. Okay, let me check this. Else, this is a leaf, not else. Press P and I. Okay, here we have 8 slots, and suppose that we have filled all the slots, and what remains is the last one. And if the last one can't hold the total, all the quantity of the dropped object, of the object I have picked up, then I don't have a 9th slot, so my inventory is full and I can't pick up the item. So what I make certain here is that I won't pick up an object that can't be stored in another slot, because there won't be empty slots. So I do this here and here because the quantity of the picked item is greater than the maximum quantity the slot can hold, and I don't want this slot to be the last one, because there is not a 9th, there is no 9th slot to hold the remaining quantity. So if your inventory is full, even if the last slot is half full, you won't be able to pick an item if the quantity of the item exceeds the maximum quantity, or the maximum quantity minus the already stored quantity. And of course I'm doing this because this is a simple example, and I would have to write much more code, and this is not my purpose. The purpose is to show you how it is done, and then you can take this code and make all the alterations and improvements you want. So the normal would be to pick up the items, and if let's say I have filled all the slots and I have left the last one half filled, let's say with 25 arrows, if I pick this one, that would store 5 arrows here, and it would leave 5 arrows on the ground. Perhaps this is more normal. This is more normal behavior from the engine, but for now I'm not I'm not letting the player pick up an item if this item can't be held totally. The sum of the units of the picked item can be held in my inventory. Okay, and what remains now is, let's save here. What remains now is to make the inventory stop and the object disappear, and what the condition will be if q equals to 0. Okay, if q equals to 0, then I want the object that was hit to disappear, and I want my loop to stop running the loop, because I don't have any quantity left to store to a slot, so no need to repeat the loop. If I had left this, I don't think that would make it would make a difference, because q is 0, so here all these calculations wouldn't be affected, because let's say subtracting 0 from 0 to minus 0 here in this lab, that would be 0, that would be 0, so that wouldn't affect the quantities or the contents of the inventory. So no need to continue, or that wouldn't be okay, or here this q would never be, since it is 0, it would never be greater than q max. Okay, no need to babbling a lot, since my quantity is 0, the quantity of the picked items is 0, stop the loop. And one more thing I have to one more change I have to make is here the slot quantity, not only the slot quantity, all these values, all these keys here in my database, okay, they may seem that they are numbers in the weapons, okay, this may seem that they are numbers, but in fact when Python imports my CSV file, reads these values as strings. So whenever I make operations that contain these these values, I'm sorry, Python will I'm sorry, Python will think that this is a string, and let's say here in this case where we have slot quantity, q and slot quantity, it wouldn't be able to add this slot quantity to an integer, because this is a string and this is an integer, and I'm wrong because here too this one will store a string value and not an integer value. So here in this operation here, that would add queue and slot quantity as strings, and you know, if you add two strings, if you add a string which contains number 1 and a string that contains number 2, it won't give a result of 3 but of 12, because it just puts two strings one after another. So what we want to do is to convert these values to integers, and I have already done this here. Convert this value to integer, and furthermore here, and sorry, here slot quantity q plus integer of slot quantity q plus integer of slot quantity minus integer of slot quantity. Okay, so I think we are ready now. Let's see if the inventory works. Okay, I have a mistake somewhere because I can't pick up an item. Main line 50. What's the problem here? If q equals to 0, and the thing is unintended does not match any. I guess it needs to go one place back here, and I think we are fine now. Press P, and again some other mistake, I'm sorry. Error plane. Wow, why? Because I have specified that here I want pickable. Yes. The thing is that I'm asking it to find quantity for the plane, because I may click here on the ground, and if I haven't specified that my object, my hit object, has a property that is named pickable, I don't want the code to be executed. So this is the correct. First check if the item is pickable and then assign the variables. So press P, and okay, there is another mistake apparently. Qmax is not defined. Yes, Qmax and no max Q, Qmax. Come on. Oh my god. And let's see, line 54. It's not callable. I think this is the correct, and oh god. So many mistakes. No attribute end object. It must be end object. Okay. Yes, alright, finally. But we have no object here, and picking up doesn't fill our inventory. I don't think. Okay, again we have some mistake in our code, so you will allow me again to find that, to check what the problem is, and I'm going to check my reference file. Slot id obj is equal elif slot id obj is empty, and this one and this one. I see that I have forgotten this here, and of course it's correct, my omission. Okay, here we know that this slot holds an empty item, and what what's reasonable is to change the value to the new object equals to string hit object. Okay, let's check again. Okay, here is the correct. Pick this one and pick this one. Okay, now what we have here, I have picked 2 arrows, or maybe 3, and we see here arrows, that the arrow is saved in a single slot, but I have no indication whether to I have no indications how many arrows are stored in this slot, and that's because I don't have a numerical representation of the quantity in my inventory. Okay, here it's easy to understand that I have one bow, one axe, but what about the arrows? How am I supposed to know whether there are stored 10, 20, 30 or more arrows? So I'm going to create the representation of the number of items stored in a slot, and for this reason I'm going to my inventory scene, and I'm going to add a text. Okay, let's scale it a bit. Let's say here it's fine, and grab it and place it over a slot, and I'm going to rename this text to, guess what, text 1. Okay, so text 1 corresponds to slot 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create copies of the text object and rename it accordingly. Grab and X and text 3 and copy with Shift D and grab X and text 4. I haven't activated the screencast keys. Okay, let me do it now, because we are writing code and it is not mandatory to show the screencast keys, but for now let's just enable them. And okay, after you have created 4 text objects named number 1, text 1 to text 4, and place them over the corresponding slots, okay, select all the text objects and Shift D to duplicate, and G, and grab along the y-axis and place them over or under, okay, let's say under the other slots, the slots 5, 6, 7 and 8, and rename each object text 5 and text 6, text 7, and finally text 8. Okay, so we have here the text, and of course this text will show the number of the items held in the slot. And in the inventory init we are going to write the code that controls this function in the inventory init script. So here where I have whenever I place an object in a slot, furthermore I'm going to specify that the object text plus string of counter, and of course now I see that I don't need this counter since I have a counter here, so we can delete these lines. Okay, we have much neater code now because counter is not needed. string of I. And what happens with all the text objects is that they have a special property named text that holds the text that is stored in the text that is stored that will be displayed. So it will be equal to inventory, and this is messy. Okay, let's reassign this the slot variable, which will be equal to inventory slot street I. Okay, just write slot here and slot here and slot ID obj quantity, and I think this is much cleaner. Okay, and let's see if it works as expected. Press P, pick up this, this and this, press I, and text. So let's see. String indices must be integers in line 20. Object text line 20 infill slots. Okay, just let me check my reference file. Slot IN. Oh, I haven't written it here, I have forgotten. So what I'm going to do, oh no, I have it here. Object text in try text is slot quantity. Of course it's slot quantity because I have specified that. Okay, replace mesh with ID of J of the inventory. So let's change this to slot ID of J, and this I don't need ID of J, of course I need only quantity. How silly of me. Okay, I think this is the correct code. P, press here and here and here and press I, and yes, that's the correct. Okay, so now it's clear. Slot 1 holds 1 bow, but slot 2 holds 20 arrows. If I pick this, it holds 30, and if I pick the fourth, okay, we have 30 in this slot and 10 in the next slot, and keep picking all the objects. Okay, so now we have our inventory filled as we wanted to. We have slots that contain multiple units of a single object, and we have other slots that contain just a single object. And furthermore, I have this angry text here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take this line and press and put it outside the if command. So even if there is a zero quantity, it will display 0 here in the rest of. Or if you don't want it if you don't want it to show the 0 value here, you can easily add an if command that will check whether the value is 0, and it will store nothing. So I think I'm going to write it here. If slot, okay, that's the problem with the screencast keys, we don't need them now. If slot quantity not equal to 0, then write the quantity, else the text is going to be equal to empty string. Let's check it. Pre and here, and yes, we have quantities only for the slots that hold items. And press to save, and let's make some experiments to see how if it works as expected in all cases. So let's make some alterations here. One thing that we wanted to see is whether a slot has some empty space, but not enough space to hold all the quantity of the item we have picked. So I'm going to my database, and sorry, to my weapons database, and I'm going to change this to 20. Okay, so if I pick one pile of arrows, I'm going to store 20 arrows in a slot, and if I pick another pack of arrows, I need to store another 20 arrows. What I want is 10 of these newly picked arrows to be stored in the same slot, and the 10 remaining to be saved on the next slot. So let's see it in the act. Export to CSV file, save, yes, okay, yes, and I hope this is the correct file. I'm going to make sure it is the correct file, because I have, okay, yes, here we are, and tutorial inventory, and db weapons. Okay, here we are, and change this. Okay, it proved that this was it was not the correct file. Okay, press this, export to CSV, yes, and let's see if it works correctly. Press P, pick one, you have 20 here, pick second pile, you have 30 here and 10 here. Pick the third, 30 and 30, and pick the fourth, 30, 30 and 20. So it works as expected. Part of the quantity stored in a slot, okay, and what remain will be stored in the next available slot. The exception is when you have reached the 8th slot, and we are going to see this in another example, because I think that the slots, the objects are not enough for this function, because we reach until here, and here, yes, we have 20 slots, so we can see it. But what I'm going to do now is that I'm going here, and I'm going to change the quantity to 40, which is greater than the quantity that can be held in a slot, in a sync slot. And let's see how it's going to work now. I'm exporting again to CSV, yes, and if I pick this one, okay, you see it has 40, but one slot cannot hold all the 40, so 30 are saved in a slot and 10 in the next. So let's pick all the other objects, and this and this and this. Okay, you see that I have filled all my slots, and I can't pick this because there is no available slot. So it's the case where here it searches for an empty slot, and it can't find one because all my slots are filled. And let's see with half-filled slots if this condition works too. So first pick all the items that are not arrows, and then pick the arrows, this and this and this, and no, it's not going to work here because I have space, or no, it is not. Oh, it has it picked, but for some reason it has not it has not entered the object. So let's see what this problem may be. Okay, have there, yes, of course there is a problem, and it won't pick it up. And the problem is that it stores the 30 and it doesn't search for the next 10. So this one here does not work as expected, and the problem is that I may have to add another here another parameter in the condition. Okay, let me think a bit where I may put it. Okay, the problem is it fills the 13 and let's see, smaller here. Let's see if this is the case. And here and here and here and here and here, and okay, no, again it picks it. Okay, and of course it picks it because it searches for an empty slot. So let's leave it here as it is. Let's see if that's the case for both examples. So here and here and here and here and here and here. Okay, we have an empty end. Okay, it picked it, but and the problem is this. Of course, that's a problem that I need to place this here and here. So only if these statements are valid, only then the change of the object will happen. So okay, for millionth time we will check. Okay, so normally now, okay, you see it's working fine. You can't pick this object because there is no enough space. And let's check for the other case. First pick the arrows and then the single items, and now you see it is filled, and normally, yes, I'm not able to pick this item. So the inventory works as expected, and this we achieved what we wanted to achieve, and this is the end of this part of this tutorial. And I'm going next part, I think I'm going to work a bit on improving the code, and probably we're going to finalize the result, and what's left is to create a character, a simple character, and equip him with the objects that we have picked up. And furthermore, what we want is to create another function, and this function will be dropping items from the inventory. So what I'm going to do next time is, except from one or two modifications in the code that will improve its performance, I'm going to create a simple character that we will pick up the items by clicking on them, and then we will go to the inventory, and then we are going to select an item and press left click and equip the character with the specified item. And furthermore, I said that we are going to equip the character by left clicking in an inventory slot. And furthermore, if we right click, we are going to make this object drop to the ground and disappear from the inventory. So what we're going to do next time is we're going to create these two functions, equipping the items from the inventory and dropping them to the ground. And this is all for now. Thank you for having the patience to watch this tutorial and listen to what I wanted to say. I hope that you learned some things from these tutorials. I know I may become tiring sometimes and saying too much and giving too much information, but my target is to spread the knowledge, and I hope that this will be an incentive, not it will not disencourage you to further work with Python and Blender. But as I have said many times, the comments area is all for you. It's for your comments, for your suggestions, for your corrections, and of course for your questions. So if you need something answered, please don't hesitate. You may post your question, and me or someone else, probably even more experienced than me, I'm sure that someone will answer you. Just be patient. So I'm checking my account quite often. So most times in a few hours, or be patient and wait 1 or 2 days, and I'm going to answer your questions. And I'm going to keep creating these tutorials, and I'm not going to stop, not until people tell me that this tutorial are totally worthless. So then I'm going to have to stop. But I think even if you just learn 1 or 2 things, or if they encourage you to further work with Python and programming in general, this will be a good thing. And that's all I want to offer to the community. Okay, I think I've said more than enough for this tutorial, and all I want to say is goodbye, and see you in the next part.